Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here and keeping Summit Stream alive. My name is Amy Stouter. I am the Associate Director for Summit White Bear Campus. So to get things started, at the count of three, we're all going to shout one thing we just love to do. Ready? One, two, three. Group projects. Wait, what? You don't love group projects? I get it, right? At best, group projects are stressful. At worst, they are a complete disaster. I learned this firsthand during my time in school. I was in a class called Group Communications, and almost all of our grade was based on how well we communicated in a group. We were randomly assigned into teams of 5 students to give a presentation on different types of communication styles. When my assigned group found a quiet spot in the library, I looked around and a question popped into my head. Am I doomed? Okay, so one of the guys was just super happy to be there, talking about his plans for the weekend and just super excited about making new friends. The other guy had a very chill surfer dude vibe that didn't quite match the rest of the group. One of the girls was super sweet, but I didn't know anything about her academic record. And the other girl had an in charge demeanor and got right to work assigning us our roles. As I looked at each of these people who are now responsible for most of my grade, I had an unsettling feeling. I wasn't in charge. I wasn't the boss. I had no control over the situation. And here's what's most frustrating about this kind of situation. We know 100% that if we did have control over the situation, we'd have a better outcome. But in that moment, I didn't have the freedom or authority to change my group. And that's never fun. In high school, more than ever before, you're becoming more responsible for your own life, which is awesome, right? Who doesn't love more freedom? However, it's probably not as much freedom and control as you want. Maybe you're old enough to drive, but for whatever reason, you don't have your driver's license yet, which means you probably have to rely on a parent or older sibling to take you somewhere. And that's just not fun. And when it comes to time, you can be involved in more things than ever before, but you certainly don't get to make up your schedule. Like you don't get to decide the start time and end time for things like classes and sports and clubs. You probably don't even decide what time you need to be home at night. And electives and clubs and teams we cheer for. We all get a say in those. But whether we get the latest smartphone or if we have to share a bedroom and what are we eating for dinner, those are all areas we typically don't get to call the shots. No one is a fan of not being in charge because if we're not in charge, chances are we're not in control. In this series, we have been talking about sex. And if there's one area of life where you do actually have some control, it's your body. It sounds weird, but think about it. As a high school student, you control what you eat. You can have 2 Big Macs with fries and a shake, or you can eat some vegetables. You control what you drink, whether it's a venti, triple calf, whatever, Monster Energy drink, or even a water. Your parents can tell you it's time to go to your room, but you have a lot of control, whether you want to have a dance party all night. You control when you sleep. In the same way, you have control over your sex life. See, we tend to think that sex is something that's out of our control. We get in the moment with someone and in our feelings, hormones, and we have no control. How are we supposed to stop that? And aren't we made with those feelings and desires? For some, sex may be an obvious eventual step that people take when they're in a relationship. And that's not even something that needs to be controlled. It just happens. For some, maybe your sexual behavior has accidentally gotten out of control. It wasn't on purpose. You've seen some things online that you can't unsee. You've sent some pics you can't unsend, and you've done some things that you can't undo. Or maybe some things happened to you that were completely out of your control. Maybe you were pressured or forced into doing something that you didn't want to do. And now you feel like you've lost all control over your sexuality. So in some ways, we feel like we have control over our sex lives, but in other ways, not so much. That's why sex is complicated. There's freedom in what we do with our bodies, but it doesn't always feel like freedom. It feels like we have no control over what we do. So what do we do? We're going to look at a letter that was written 2,000 years ago. Believe it or not, what we're going to read is just as relevant today as it was back then. In the first century, the Apostle Paul became one of the most influential Christians in history. He traveled throughout the known world, sharing the grace and freedom he found in Jesus. Freedom from always having to be perfect, freedom from having to figure out things on his own, and freedom from following a list of rules. A large part of Paul's audience, the Jews, the idea of this being free from a list of rules was huge. The Jews were God's chosen people. And for thousands of years, they had followed rules that governed every single aspect of their lives. Rules about food, rules about work, rules about family, and of course, rules about following God. But when Jesus arrived on earth, all of that changed. He removed religious rules as a way to get to God. And in their place, he offered a relationship. Not only that, it was a relationship that offered true freedom. Look at what Paul says in his letter to the Galatians. So Christ has truly set us free. Now make sure that you stay free and don't get tied up again in the slavery to the law. This was such a radical thing to say because just like today, people at that time believed that good rule following behavior was the only way to connect with a perfect God. But after hearing this idea, a lot of people did what we probably would do too. They took this freedom from the law as a permission to go the opposite direction. In other words, if rules were bad, then no rules must be awesome. Now, we don't know exactly what people felt the permission to do once they experienced freedom from the law, but apparently it wasn't good. Because in a letter to the Corinthian people, Paul really felt the need to clarify some things. He starts by saying this: you say, I'm allowed to do anything. Now, for some of you, this verse just became the only one you want to memorize. It's the reason you've been asking your small group leader, well, how far is too far? What's the limit? We're always trying to figure out what we can get away with or where the line is. And Paul is saying everything. You are able to do whatever you want. Imagine if your parents said, you can do whatever you want, just stay at home. Great, right? So you set the thermostat to 50 degrees, buy 20 movies on your mom's Amazon account, and build a campfire to roast marshmallows on the coffee table. And then your parents freak out. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You said I could do anything, which is true. They didn't tell you to not set the coffee table on fire to roast marshmallows, but that doesn't mean what you did was smart. You know that. It's kind of what Paul is saying when he adds this. You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. This verse perfectly sums up the balance between freedom and responsibility. Yes, you technically can do anything. That's true. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Just like the example of setting a fire on your coffee table. Your parents gave you freedom, but you didn't handle it responsibly, which means what? Yeah, we all get it. You end up losing freedom. So when it comes to your life and your body, you have a lot of freedom. In fact, you have more freedom than you've ever had. So, can you hook up with that guy or girl? Yes. Can you send that pic? Yes. Can you look at that site? Yes. But Paul says the question isn't, can I do something? The better question is, should I do something? Let's be real here. No one is following your every move right now. At some point, you're going to be alone or alone with someone else. In that moment, you will have the freedom to do whatever you want. According to Paul, you need to ask yourself what you should do with that freedom. Like I've been saying, mishandling freedom actually leads to less freedom and less control. That's why he adds this. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. This takes Paul's earlier message one step further. Not only can something not be good for you, but it can take control of you. You've probably seen this happen. But when you show restraint and care about what you should do, you end up having more freedom. Paul says that we're made to be in control, not be controlled. We've been given amazing freedom, but the only way to truly experience freedom is to be responsible with that freedom. And when it comes to our sexuality, being responsible means taking control of what we experience, what we do, and what we view. Simply put, you were made to be the boss of your body. Your body wasn't made to be the boss of you. When Paul used a word like slave to describe what it's like for us to be controlled by something or someone else, he used the strongest language possible. Why? He wanted to make sure that people knew that when they were irresponsible with their physical freedom, they immediately became less free than they thought. Something or someone else became the boss of their body. If you're wondering whether or not you're in control of your sexual decisions and behaviors, here's a few ways to tell. If the idea of saying no or giving something up scares you, you're not in control. If you want to say no, but someone else says yes for you, you're not in control. If you want to say no, but you can't seem to bring yourself to actually say no, you're not in control. If anything on that list resonates with you, if you feel like you've lost control or given up control of your sexual behavior, well, how can you begin to get it back and take responsibility with the freedom you've been given? First, talk about it. A good place to start? Right here at church. Chances are good that your group leader has walked through some of the same stuff you're experiencing. Believe it or not, they won't judge you. Or you can talk to another adult you trust. Just let someone in on what you're dealing with. Second, practice saying no to things that aren't good for you. For a lot of us, this may be easy. Maybe you're naturally assertive and have no problem saying no to anything or anyone. But for other people, saying no isn't as easy. You may feel pressured for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you feel pressured by friends, a guy, a girl, or even by yourself because you want to fit in and don't want to seem weird. But like anything in life, the more you say no to stuff that isn't good for you, the more confident you become. Third, decide ahead of time what you're going to say no to. Here's the truth. A lot of sexual behavior isn't planned out. In other words, we generally didn't plan to do what we did, sent what we sent, or watch what we watched. It kind of happens in the moment, right? A moment when, if we're honest, we weren't in control and thinking clearly. The best time to decide what not to do is not in the moment, but before the moment when you are in control. Remember, you were made to be the boss of your body. So this week, pre-decide what you're not going to do, what situations you are not going to fall into, and what choices you won't be making. Then go one step further and decide what you'll do to get out of the tempting situation when you're in it. What will you say? Where will you go? Who will you tell? Make a plan. Then, when you find yourself in a place where you have to make a decision, the decision will already be made. Now, I realize because I brought it up earlier, some of you are thinking about the control that was taken from you, the sexual decision that someone else pressured you to make or made without your consent. If that's you, can I first just say I'm really sorry? And I think one of the best things you can do tonight is to share that with your small group leader. You shouldn't have to process that alone. But I also want you to know the same truth applies. You were made to be the boss of your body, and you can still be. That thing that happened to you was never God's desire for you. And He can help you take back control by being the boss of your body now, even if you weren't given the chance before. Listen, this is a time in your life where you'll continually gain more freedom and more opportunity. Once you graduate high school, that freedom will increase exponentially. One big area you'll experience freedom in relationships, in your body, and in sex. The best way to experience that freedom later is to be responsible with the freedom you have now. Proactively take charge of your body, your situations, your choices. Decide in advance not to simply do what you're told, but to be the leader, be the owner, be in charge of your sex life now and in the future. You, my friend, were made to be the boss of your body, and that starts today. Thanks. See you later.